Hey guys, it's Matt Hanham here and welcome to the Amplify Your Business podcast. Okay, Matt Hanham here, and this is the Amplify Your Business podcast. I'm here today with a very good friend of mine, Mr. Danny Marriner. Danny, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Man, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Since I had the idea of this show, you were one of those people that I had in mind that I'd love to get you on the show at some point. So really cool to have you here. But maybe just to kick things off, do you want to just let people know, or people that might not know you, what you do, what you're about, and yeah.
Well, there's a couple of things I'm doing, and the first thing is how I make my bread and butter is through personal training. So I'm a qualified personal trainer, and I've been doing that for about 20 years. So that's how I make my bread and butter. But the big area that I'm moving into now is life coaching. And it's, I have a stand, and my stand is to empower, inspire, and give people hope. And by giving people hope, we can get people to create leadership in their lives. So those are the two big things I'm doing.
Awesome. My sort of next question was really, what's the vision for your business? But I think you almost sort of summed it up there. But why don't we build that out a little bit into, so what is the next 5 years? So I've known you as a trainer, incredible trainer, one of the best trainers I've ever seen, and I've come across quite a few. And that's not just about what you do in the gym, but I guess it's about that leadership approach. And I've got to see that. But so it's pretty exciting that you're sort of moving into that sort of speaking and life coaching space. What does the next sort of 5 years look like on that journey?
Wow. I've just come back from Bali, and my wife and I, we sat down, we did like a plan.
Nice.
And it's going to be on the world stage. Next 5 years, I'll be on the world stage speaking to people. And the reason for that is because I truly have a stand, and that stand is to empower and inspire people and to give people hope in their lives, and they create leadership. Like when people talk leadership, what comes to mind for most people is like who's got the most wealth, cars, houses. But leadership is in any area of your life which you're confronted by most, which requires a risk and some sort of crisis in your life to move past. And that's how we create transformations. So the world stage which I want to speak on, I can get that message out to a wider audience. So that's the pinnacle to be on a world stage to really get my message across. But it's just to help as many people as I possibly can. And someone asked me, not so long ago, who is your target market?
It's a good question if you're a marketer out there. Who is your
target market?
USP?
And I had to laugh because my target market is just human beings.
Yeah.
Human beings. Every human being have the base requirements. And it's to give them hope and to create something worthwhile in their lives. So for the next 5 years, I'll be working towards creating the platform and the stage which I can reach the most people.
Yeah. I think you make a very interesting point there. I think a lot of people perceive leadership as a very much top-down approach and situation just around positions of power. But leadership is many things, and I mean, maybe people have heard the terminology now, top-down, bottom-up leadership and that type of activity, but there's, a leader can be anywhere, in any space, in any organization, and even for them and themselves. It's about an approach on what you're doing, and not so much around who might have the title, and that, because that's not leadership. There's an awful lot of people in leadership positions, inverted commas, that really aren't leaders in a group, in an organization. There's someone else, often fairly silently, in a team, group, sporting, on the field, that is more of a true leader and driving a group of people.
Yeah, there's a Chinese philosopher by the name of Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu was regarded as one of the wisest men that have ever lived. And he had a quote. It said, when the best leader's work is done, the people will say we did it ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of approach that I like, because these days, a lot of people, they want to be seen as leaders. You know, so they're very loud, they're very brash, they're very out there. But for me, when I see that, I think, oh, poor child needs to be seen.
Yeah.
You know, poor child needs to be seen.
I hope people have caught that, because that's a very valid point. And look, I get that. I also fight a bit of that, as we all do, right? There's an ego in there. But the truth around leadership is not, it's not the one standing up being seen. It's not not that high profile. It's like, what is the goal and outcome that the organization, group, whatever it is, humanity is trying to achieve, and who is influencing that to be true, to come to fruition.
It's like the leader's job is to create more leaders, not followers. Yeah. And when you fully understand that, then it's all about getting the people around you to create leadership in your lives. And if we go back to the start when I said leadership is all about going into areas of your lives which you're most confronted by, where there's a real risk and there's a real crisis involved to create transformations. So a leader's job, a real leader, an authentic leader's job is to bring forth leadership in other people's lives and trying and attempting them to take some sort of risk and crisis in their life. And that's why authentic leadership is so hard, because you've got to call out people to do things that they don't want to do. And people will be against you. I mean, if we look at some of the greatest leaders in history, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa. Now, if you check their bank accounts, you'd probably find that they didn't have the biggest of bank accounts, or the most cars, or the most houses.
Or care.
But they are known to be some of the greatest leaders ever. And they didn't stand for being seen as the leader that we typically see today. They got people around them to become leaders.
I think it's funny too, there's a very common view is that once you can jump up a few steps on that rung, and become a leader, whether that's a business owner or whatever that looks like, that, it's going to be easier. that's you just kick up your heels there, and that's the place to be. And the irony of anyone that's been there and done that is they realize it's the complete opposite. I mean, basically, the more employees you have, the more people that you're the employee of, effectively, because you are responsible for them. You need to then embody and do and help create them to take leadership activities to achieve the common good. And the bigger the organisation, the structure, the more you have to deal with and do. There's no kicking back in the office, that like you might see on a nice Hollywood movie that just shows you the guy or the gal just living the life, right? And that's in a business approach, but that's in any life and any approach, any group of people, because we are we're human beings which are community driven people. Mm-hmm. We like to be around communities and that's the way we play. But leadership has this funny like everyone has the aspiration, but no one really wants to do what's required to be a leader. Yeah. Even though it's so anyone can be a leader, and leadership can embody so many different activities, right? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So was there anything holding you back when you got started? You even, let's go with your bread and butter business, to jump out on your own and run your own business apart from employment, like when you first made that jump?
Here's the thing, and this is why most people are reluctant to step into that leadership role, is because you have to go outside of what you know. Yeah. And when you go outside of what you know, that requires risk. Yeah. And risk and crisis is the very thing that creates transformations and creates leaders. So when I first stepped into this role of becoming a leader, It wasn't to become a leader, it's to do what leaders do. And so I had to step into the unknown because my information, everything that I had learned, was limited. So I now had to step into an area of my life which I didn't know much about. So now I was being seen and vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, that's when people see you, they see all sides of you. They see the good side, the bad side, the dark side, the shiny side. And that's what creates leaders, being vulnerable in front of others in the act of creating something worthwhile in your life. So for me, it took me a while to get my head around the fear of judgment of others, because there's judgment, because now you're doing something which is out of the mold that people typically see you in. Yeah. They go, hang on, Danny's a personal trainer. He's also this, and he's that, and he's this. But now you're stepping outside of that. And for people, when you step outside of the titles or labels that they give you, it's quite challenging to them. It's like, hang on, they don't know how to take this.
Well, challenging to them, right?
Yeah, it's challenging to them because they don't know how to take it now. Because
I can't put you in that box anymore. Like, yeah. Oh shit, you go in a few boxes. What's going on?
Yeah, that's right. And people can only relate to you as a particular label that they've given you. Yeah. Now you're stepping outside that label. It's like, oh, how do I relate to Danny doing something different to what I would normally relate to him as? Yeah. So then for me, I'm doing this thing that I'm inspired to do in my life, and I also know that I'm going to be judged and people are going to have form opinions of me, and I can see that too because people demonstrate that as well. They might separate themselves, they might distance themselves from you, they might go quiet. Yep. So that's what I found when I decided to step into what I'm here to do. But it's my stand to empower, to inspire, to create leadership in other people's lives, which is what really propels me to do what I'm doing.
Yeah. So where did that itch come from? Like, what? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So go back to maybe that sparkle, that itch early on, and trace it maybe as far back as you think you can. Maybe not down to childhood, but like when did you think like I really need to be speaking and spreading the message? My message. Our message, like I sort of see them as much the same. It's just whether you're a type of person that's compelled to go and spread a good word and be a speaker and help sort of try and change lives or not. I think once you get into that top realm of a lot of speakers, they're all have much the same cause and much the same sort of drive. So where did it start? Where did that itch sort of float into your mindset?
I actually always knew it.
Yeah,
I always knew it. Like even doing whatever job I was doing, personal training. I've done many different jobs over the last 3 decades. But I always knew in the background there was something that I should be doing, something more meaningful and something more purposeful in my life. I knew that I was destined to do something. And it may seem cliche, but we all have a calling, and you may not talk about it, and you may not speak about it, and you may not tell anyone about it, but in those quiet moments when you're at home, when you're by yourself, every single person aspires to do something greater. And that greater thing is purpose and meaning in your life. So in those quiet moments when I was at home or I was by myself, I always knew what I was here to do.
How young do you think?
I knew there was something from about the age of 8. Yeah. And if I trace it back to primary school, high school, beyond high school, usually I just found that when I would speak, I could speak. I could talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And I found that few people would gather around and they sort of found it interesting what I had to say. And I thought, oh, well, there might be something in this. I enjoy talking, people enjoy listening. And then, years later, I add in empowerment, inspiration, giving others hope and creating leadership. I thought, wow, you know what? I think this is what I might be here for. This might be my purpose. And so for me now, I knew from a really, really early age, I couldn't define exactly what it was. But as years later, through wisdom and experience and getting a little bit mature, I could actually put a definition into what I'm actually here to do.
It's crazy. I'll say much the same thing for myself in that I always had that. And you go through times where you're letting the sort of conscious mind take over a little more and I do this for a living or I do that. And then you're right. It's those quiet moments when you stop and from, I would argue much the same age. I don't know whether it was that I knew I was going to speak or what it was going to be, but I knew I was, I don't think the word was around really, but I knew I was an entrepreneur. I knew I would run businesses. I knew I would have a leadership capacity in a lot of ways and through family, people, other things. I just knew it. And I think you spend a lot of time, look, to be honest, a few decades for me and probably somewhat for yourself as well, not allowing you to be that, but skirting and little bits of it come into your life, but you don't really wholeheartedly step forward and go, no, that is me, and I will now identify myself as that. You know what I mean? And what I guess I was leading to is there's this big debate about sort of entrepreneurs and whether you, and even leadership in a sense, and are you born that way or can anyone learn how to do it? And I genuinely believe that you can't just learn how to do it. You can't learn, I think anyone could, but you can't learn from reading and studying and you have to learn from actually the physical doing. And the physical doing is tough. But like you said, the amount, it comes from how many times you're willing and able to jump out of that comfort zone, that box, and doing it more and more and more and more and more and more. And that is really easy, but really hard. Really hard to keep doing, right? I know. So that's the point I wanted to jump home is it isn't for everyone. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. But I think there's this mindset at the moment that everyone can just do this. And I think there's our workforce is changing dramatically. I think a lot of people will be far more freelance based and we'll move back to that stonemason type era where we're all we all have our own little micro businesses, a lot more than just everyone working for big corporates. But then there's this leadership, this speaking role, and I know what you mean. Some judgment and people like, oh, you're doing that. No, everyone's doing. No, that some people might be trying, but I think some are doing it from an ego space. Yeah. If you're truly doing it for the right reasons and you're coming through a leadership capacity and you've got that in you from a very early age, that's unique. Yeah. It's far more unique than you've allowed yourself to be and live in that present space. So, yeah, I guess that's what I would say there. And I really, I've seen that in you as well. And having known you for a long time, and you've only really started to speak and do a lot more, more recently. You always had that leadership approach, and you were a leader, even if you weren't necessarily acknowledging it. And there was quite a large group effectively that would follow your advice and opinion and it's not necessarily even what you're saying. Yeah. It's how you approach things in your presence and what you're doing and your actions, right? Yeah, so, that's really cool. So what did early childhood look like for you then? If we go back to then, do you think that was there some exposure in childhood to activities, or where do you think that might have come from? And, how was childhood, I suppose? And,
you might have to you might have to stop it. You might have to start recording. Yeah. My childhood was, everyone's got an interesting childhood, but, I suppose my mother was a really, she was the authority.
Okay.
And she was strict, very, very strict. And, often I would sort of look back and I think, whoa, that was a tough sort of childhood, you know. And there were moments like, you know, I've just returned back from Bali, and I met up with a coach in Bali. Amazing man, amazing. And he can pick up things which are you can't quite explain. And I remember we were training together just a couple of days ago, and I was doing something, and he goes, "Wow, you have an ability to relate and be with females by just creating that space and being present for them, and they can sort of like feel safe and just openly talk to you." I didn't actually tell him this. He just looked at me, right? And I stopped, I put the dumbbells down, I go, "Yeah, I can." He goes, "Yeah, it's very, very unique." He says, "Somewhere in your life, a female has taught you that." And I said, "Yeah, it was my mother." So my mother taught me to really respect females. And although she was very, very, very tough when it comes to discipline, she was the authority of the house, she taught me things which at the time I had no idea. And it's only today, at the age of 45, that I'm so thankful for the upbringing that I had. However, tough it was, there are these things that she's given me which is unique. And, my coach said, "That's what you've got is unique." And I thought it was normal. He goes, "No, it's quite unique." So it was tough. It was unpredictable. But it was a very loving childhood. All my siblings were all adopted. There's 6 of us siblings. We're all adopted. They were all European. I'm the Samoan in the family. So even that is unique, in itself.
That is a unique combination.
Yeah. And so it's been a combination of many different things.
So I guess that's what I was just getting at, without digging too deep into anything. I was wondering, was there an event or some exposure you think that helped you sort of, or shaped you into wanting to do what you do? And it sounds like there's some hardship, and I think there's a lot of stories around hardship. I think when you have some levels of hardship, whether that's childhood or wherever in your life, it's often a motivator. And I think once you can get past the pain and this is very generally and off the cuff speaking, you can turn that into a very strong motivator to go and do things and change things. And you see people coming from nothing, able to create incredible businesses, lives, other things, because they've just been exposed to somewhere they don't want to go again.
There was a moment, I remember when I was 8 years of age, I was sitting on my bed and I was looking out the window. I was thinking, what does life have to offer? What does life have to offer?
Do you think, sorry, there's probably more to that. I had, I can relate to things like that, right? How common is that? Or not? That's the question I've really got, and I'd really love to know, because I can definitely see almost that exact image of you doing something very similar.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't reckon it's very common at all.
Yeah.
Because I've actually told the story
Yeah.
to quite a few people. And so at the age of 8, I was sitting on a bed, I was looking out the window, and I said, what does life have to offer? And every single person that I've told it to was like, wow, are you serious? 8 years of age? I go, yeah. It's as vivid and it's as real as it was back then as it is today. And I looked out the window and I thought, I can't wait to see what life can offer me. Yeah. And I don't think it's common at all, because I don't hear it. I'm 45 years of age now, and I only hear it by certain people. And those certain people that I hear it by, most people know of these people. But the people that I hang out with, and all the people that I've ever met over my lifetime, I've never heard anyone sort of give me the same sort of story, that they can remember a particular event in their life at that particular age which has shaped their whole life. There may be, but it's never spoken of.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? I mean, unless someone's got a major event which they can, someone, a parent passing at a certain age and they had certain hardships and that created them to then have to, to help take care of the family. Like some people have some form of event or otherwise. And I'm not saying, everyone has different hardships at different levels, but I do notice that a lot of motivation and just like waking up awareness of what's going on often comes out of some form of pain and hardship and then deciding sort of enough's enough and we're going to go and do something different, right? But that's really interesting, to sit there at 8 years old and to be thinking like, to be fair, above what many adults might have been thinking that sitting around you at the time, if you know what I mean. Not above, but just at a different level of thought, a different style of thought, not just getting caught up in what's going on or just your typical activities. So interesting stuff. So where did training start for you then? So how did you get into that? I mean, why? And how did that come into your life?
I started training when I was 14, and there were some people in our town who had like a home gym, and for whatever reason, it became the town gym. And
no one else had a gym, right? Actually, I think I've seen a photo or something, and it's like cool, like old rusty weights and stuff sitting there. So
when you first see the pictures, you think it's like some scenes out of a movie set, right? you look at it and you go, no one could possibly train there. That could not possibly be a gym, right? But it was. And, so I started there when I was 14. And it was probably one of the toughest things that I've ever done in my life. I was 14, overweight, out of shape. And up until then, I was training in my room. And I'd been training in my room since I was 12. I got to 14 and my weights were no longer heavy enough. So everything I had in my room was no longer doing the job that I wanted to do. So then I got to that point in my life where it's like you either join the gym if you want to continue progressing or stay in your room and just maintain at best, right? So now I'm confronted by two things. It's either face the pain of staying in your little room and getting no progress, or face the pain of stepping up and going to the town gym and being seen and vulnerable in front of others. And that pain of staying in my room was greater than stepping into the town gym. So I remember when I was 14 years of age, I stepped into that gym, and that's where I trained for the next 6 years that I was in New Zealand. And I was hooked. I mean, it was like, it was in my blood. I loved it. And I hooked up with a good friend of mine, and we would train like madmen, like possessed. We had this philosophy that all you had to do to get progress, or the most progress, was train harder, hardest. And we thought, that's...
And when you're that old, right, you just keep going.
Okay, it was like money in the bank. All you had to do is front up, put the hard work in, and you get more money. So we go, great. So we used to go to the gym, and we used to train like our lives depended on it. And often would lead to, vomiting was just a part of it, right? Blacking out, nauseous, but it was all part of it. And then it progressed into the personal training scene, where I started training people. Yep. And
so that was in Australia then?
It was in Australia, yeah.
Okay.
And I loved it. I love people to experience what I got out of it and how beneficial.
So were you a little kid, a skinny kid? I mean, you were overweight at the time. What was the kicker? Like, what was the motivation to get started? Just to what lit the flame?
We owned a cake shop in New Zealand, a bakery.
Yeah.
So breakfast would consist of sausage rolls, pies, cakes, you name it, and then wasn't before too long that I ballooned out. Yeah. Became I was real overweight. So that was really the motivation for me to get into it.
Yeah. Okay.
to get into weight training.
Yeah. So that's then the motivation that you want to bring, or wanted to bring to other people, or you wanted to help people obviously in a similar situation and help them, with weight loss, through training.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's that physical side, but there's also the mental aspect as well.
Yeah.
And I've found through my own training, it can build a mental tolerance through training.
Yeah.
With dealing with the hardships of what training can offer you, and then that carries over to all the hardships, a lot of hardships that you encounter in life.
Well, I know you've pushed me sort of well beyond my limits probably many times in a gym or in an environment before, whether we're pulling tires or doing some crazy stuff. Well, what do you think is it that, I'm a big fan of the environment. It's a safe enough environment where you can really test yourself at a level. But what do you think holds us back from doing that, typically? Because I think it's very common for us to hold ourselves back and not push ourselves to as close to our limit, if not a little bit past, to see where we go. I think training's one space, but also in life. I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, you've obviously dealt with a lot of people.
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
Well, it comes down to one simple thing. It comes down to how much you value anything. And whatever you value in life, you prioritize it proportionately. Yeah. So if you're only pushing it, say 70-80%, you only value it 70-80%. So then you prioritize it 70-80%. However, you come across those people who give it 100%. Yeah. Some people I've trained in the past, you don't have to encourage them, you don't have to motivate them, you don't have to inspire them. No pep talks, boom, you just say go, right? Because they see the value in that. And it's like in anything in life, you will find people giving 100% to whatever area in their life that they value most. Yeah. So a lot of people that come into the gym, they might only give 7-8%, but you'll find other areas in their life, like with their family, at home, in their own workplace, which they may value more than the gym, and you will see them giving a far greater effort in those areas than they do the gym.
Yeah, I mean, that's my next. I know you've had a lot of fairly affluent clients, etc., and you sit in their pocket. You're in a quite the proximity of where you are. Training someone 3-4 times a week, on a regular basis. Like you are in an interesting little proximity to someone's world. Yeah. You can see through what they're doing at exercise. You can probably see through their. It's quite obvious even in their activity in a gym. What their stress level looks like, what's happened the last week, etc. I mean, do you have any stories or somewhere around like how you've been able to sort of take help a business person or someone? Because I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I know if you can really ground yourself and do well from a training and a nutrition perspective, you can actually really throw a lot more and give a lot more to other aspects of life. And do you have any stories where you've been able to really sort of transform someone, let's say in their business life or in their family life through getting them to a great space in their mindset and their training and nutrition?
Let me see. There's probably hundreds.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
There's probably hundreds. Which one shall I use?
Something weird, I don't know.
I'll tell you one. Right. I'll use a different name for this guy. Let's call him Norm.
Norm, okay.
Oh, hang on, his name is Norm. No. Let's use Norm. Anyway, this is different. I don't actually use this approach, and I didn't actually realise that what would come of this approach, but it was unique anyway, but it worked.
Right.
I had a client that wasn't compliant, wasn't doing anything that he should. Wasn't doing anything that he should have been doing, right? So he wasn't following the plan, right? So outside of the training, he wasn't following the eating plan, wasn't doing extra cardio. He wasn't doing all the things that you should be doing. So I had a conversation with my wife. My wife and I role played over the weekend how I was going to approach this. So I become Norm, and my wife become me, and she was teaching me how I approach this, right?
Yeah.
So she said, turn up to the gym, and have a conversation with him, and ask him why he's not compliant, and then talk about ABC. I front up on Monday. As I'm driving to work, I'm going through all the role plays that my wife had sort of taught me over the weekend.
Yeah.
Come the moment, it all went out the window. I said to him, I'm not training you anymore. So complete opposite to what my wife told me. I'm not training you anymore. You're not compliant. That wasn't the deal. And you're not getting any progress. And this was as I was handing him the barbell. So now I put the barbell away. So he's standing there with his hand out to receive the barbell, which I was giving him. Now I'm re-racking.
You've taken it away.
I'm taking it away from him. And he looked at me. You can imagine the look on his face. He looks at me going, do you mean we're finished today or tomorrow? And I go, no, we're finished forever. Right? So now I'm talking to him, in conversation with him, and also I've got my wife like on my tip of my shoulder, like shaking her, going, "Oh no, that's not what we role played, right?" So now it was all over, and I caught up with this man about 3 months later, and he shouted out to me from the other side of the gym. He was on the treadmill, and he goes, "Hey Danny, come over here." Oh, who's that calling out to me? I went over to him, and as I got closer, I noticed that he'd lost a significant amount of weight. And he goes, "You, my friend, you are a genius." I go, "Oh." I go, "Why?" He goes, "Look at me. I've lost 10 kilos, right?" I go, "Oh, what did I do?" And he goes, "I run companies, organizations where I have hundreds of people working for me, and no one has ever sacked me."
But it worked, right?
No one has ever sacked me. He goes, "My friend, I went home, I sat down, and my wife asked me, 'What's wrong?' And he goes, 'It is the first time in my life I have ever been sacked,' right? And then, because it sunk in, and he saw what I was prepared to do for him, losing money, because he was paying me money a week to train him. And he was thinking, here's this guy, Danny, willing to sack me, even though it meant missing out on money. So that's what he values. He values his integrity. He values when he takes on board someone that they're going to follow what they need to follow to get them from where they are to where they want to be. So he took it all in, and then from that day forward, he started following everything that he should have been following. And as a result, he lost 10 kilos.
Because someone like that would have been able to just throw money at a lot of problems, right? Or there's always someone would just keep doing that for them. You know, they're not going to say no. You know, so shocking him, you know, in that situation. Because he's like, "Well, I'm paying you. Well, you know, I'm paying you to deal with me." But you're like, "No. This is not happening.
Yeah.
We're not achieving what we want here." So, okay, maybe you role-played something a little softer by the sounds of things, but you know, but the approach worked, and I think that's, it takes a shock, right? Like we were talking about before. Sometimes it takes a bit of a shock to the system to go, "All right, I need to do something differently," and that worked for him, and he didn't even have to pay you anything else.
Yeah. But the big thing here is being integral with your word. So, sure, it meant money, but my integrity in my word means more than money. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I'm just sacking you, because that's not what I'm about. And I think that's the big thing, what he took on board. Danny is a man of his word, of integrity, and he's prepared to sack someone over money. And so he saw it, and as a result, it inspired him to do bigger things.
Yeah, awesome. So, what about social media? What has social media done for your business, and how do you sort of approach it?
And to tell the truth, social media for me, I've been terrible.
Yeah.
I've been terrible. And the big reason why I've been terrible is because I haven't really stepped into it fully. And if we go back to my coach, who I met in Bali just recently, he said, "Get your Instagram working again, get on as many platforms as you can and start to be seen.
Just to put it out there, I mean, this guy walked into into my studio an hour ago, and I haven't seen him for a few months, and I was like, hang on, do we need to get 3 tape measures to measure that bicep? I mean, I've known you for a long time, but you're looking bigger than ever. I think a few Instagram photos wouldn't go astray. But yeah, sorry, go on.
And a large part of the reason why I haven't got a presence like I should on social media is because I haven't been fully stepping in to what I'm trying to create in my life. And you know, this meeting that I had recently with my friend, he said, man, you got to go all in. And it resonated with me deeply. And I haven't been good on social media, as good as what I can be. So now that I'm back, you know, you'll see me on as many platforms as I possibly can, because I know in this day and age you have to be seen. If you're not on any of these platforms, you pretty much don't exist.
It's true. Yeah. And you know, the irony is we do it for everyone else, and then up until a few months ago we weren't doing it for ourselves. And you know, podcasting, the vlogging, the blogs, everything we're creating, the posting. It's actually fun. We actually wanted to do it all along, but for some reason we only just dabbled, right, for a long time. And you know, that's the same irony of the mechanic with the dodgy car. It's like, how really? Like we weren't doing it ourselves, and once we stepped into it, and I think you'll find the same as you. I know you do a bit. Like I'm not. You certainly don't do nothing, but as you step into it deeper and deeper, it's so easy. It's just the same simple habits. It's just creating and making sure you stick with those habits and routines, and then just gradually building on those building blocks and just adding the next. We do this kind of post too, or we do this audio show, you know, on a weekly, fortnightly basis, whatever it is. It's just creating those little structures, which is really how because that's how you go all in. You can't actually just literally jump headfirst and do everything. You sort of can, but you just need to just build a little framework. You know what I mean? We can talk about that. I can help a little bit as well. I definitely agree. What you do already, I think people do see, but it could certainly be amplified out to more, and could definitely help grow as well. And the tools are just phenomenal compared to what was around. What we can do now, and everyone's running around complaining, or we're on our phone too much, or we're addicted to this. Well, we're not addicted to the phone. We're addicted to our life. And right now we're communicating with this many people. We're dealing with the calendar. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're doing a lot of stuff with this little tool. That's what we're doing. Things will change. AR will come in. I'll be able to see my list of questions that I'm asking you here, in front of my eyes in a minute. But for the most part, it's just an incredible tool that we can use. And you're right. You make a key point. There is actually no choice. It's just, when are you going to step up and start really doing it? Because those of us that don't really do it are going to be in trouble. Like a lot of trouble, because you will not be relevant. It's really scary, but I find such a massive opportunity, and it just depends on literally how you look at things, and how people look at things. So, all right, let's have a look. So, how about what's something outside of training and work? Something that maybe your family and friends might know about you. Something else you do, a hobby or pastime.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually, because if people saw me outside of what I do, what they, I don't know what they perceive me to be actually, but I have a feeling that if they saw me outside of work, a lot of things that I do, they'll be really, really surprised. I'm a very spiritual person. Yeah. I do things which most people would probably find someone of an older age doing, like 85 or 90. I can sit outside in our garden and I can watch birds for hours, just birds. And I remember when my nephew came over, he was only like 24, 25, and I said to him, "Hey man, did you see that? Did you see that bird?" And he goes, "What?" And I go, "Did you see that bird?" He goes, "No, I wasn't looking for a bird." And I go, "Yeah, if you look carefully, there's a bird on that branch. It flies over there." And the look on his face, man, it was priceless. And he said to me, "Are you 90? Who looks at birds?"
Was he sitting there with you?
He had no choice.
Right.
He had no choice, you know. But he did. But he thought we were just going up there to sit down, not bird spotting.
Right.
And so a lot of the times I can just sit down.
Is that sort of, you think, just a mindfulness?
I think it is, man. I think, I think it is. And, you know, what most people see as exciting, if they saw a lot of what I do, they would find, how does that guy find that exciting? I can go for a walk, which is quite nice, which is just along the river. I live a couple of streets over from the river. And then there's a park bench. And I'll sit down at the park bench for hours and I'll just look and look and look and look. So outside of what people normally see of me, there's a complete opposite side in my private life.
It's a very common story, you know, in a lot of ways as well. And I was talking to someone recently who just spent some time with an NBL coach in that capacity, and he was just talking, and he went on got to sort of join his training camp for a week, and this coach took him to a park bench out of, you know, where he looks at the ducks about 3 times a week. You know, super busy, like, you know, high level coach, you know, Australian level, and you know, but it was part of his rhythm and his routine was to do that and to spend that time. And he tried. I think he tried to get there 3 times a week, and that was just part. And he thought enough of showing the practice of it, you know, into the thought. But you know, it's a matter of time, and again, it's a matter of, I guess, what you value and where you put the time. But I think sometimes you need a counterbalance, right? Depending if you're, and you know, I tend to call myself a big thinker, and I'm always getting into some complex stuff in my head. You actually need something to counterbalance that at times, and that might be just that whether it's bird watching or what that is. You know, so obviously you get some form of mindfulness out of training, which I think a lot of people do as well. But there's a yin and a yang to it, right? It does need some balance. So
if I could just add to that, I caught up with a friend recently who I sort of like haven't had much. I haven't really seen or spoken to much in the last 5 years. So I got in communication with him just recently. And I said, hey, would you like to meet up and have a conversation? He goes, yeah. So most people would think over a coffee, right? I said, he goes, where would you like to meet? And I go, meet me at that park bench on the corner of that point in Applecross below the cliff. And he wrote back and he goes, are you serious? And I go, yes, right? So there's this park bench, which is... it's a part of this walkway that goes around Applecross, and it sits out on this point.
I know.
So looks the river. You know the one.
I know it well.
You know the one. So I said it to this guy, and it was almost like I don't know. He thought at first that I was just joking, but I was serious. And we met there at 7 a.m. We had a great conversation, but. I suppose a lot of those things you only really see in movies or in scripts, you know.
It's not quite the normal thing, right?
It's not quite the normal thing.
It's like, which coffee shop did you mean? No, this isn't a coffee shop. You can bring one if you want.
And the next meeting will be at some old oak tree and, you know, some foreign friggin' suburb far away.
Yeah, I like that. And I like to try and do more of that type of thing. Like at times we'll go for, if we're having a meeting, we'll just start walking. And do that instead of just sitting down, you know, or other things. And I think sometimes we just get caught on what we're supposed to do, you know, and you just keep doing the normal thing. Whereas that's like, you know, I know the spot, it's magnificent. Like, why wouldn't you want to sit there and have a chat? Like, you know, although I'm sure a lot of people would walk past and be like, what are those guys doing? But you know what I mean? Like, why, you know, we don't allow ourselves, I think, at times to just like be able to like enjoy things like that. And I think it's like, well, that's not busy. That's not hustling. that doesn't. The finger went up there. So, yeah, that's not hustling. That's not. We don't allow ourselves to feel that freedom, which is why I think a lot of people can use training in that for a mindfulness type approach, because at least they feel like they're achieving in an aspect. But like sitting still is probably one of the greatest skills, which I think many people don't like or struggle to just stop and think, and because they don't want to think. It can hurt them, if there's things that they're not doing well, or they've got relationship issues, or they've got this or that. But that's the time when you can improve life, right? And you can do things there. So pretty interesting. It's going all over the place. But so do you have any mentors? Who would you sort of consider mentors of yours at the moment?
Well, there's been many mentors. Yeah. In fact, if we look at, I suppose when we think about mentors, we look about, we're talking about coaches or someone that we look up to, some wise person, someone we pay. But I can sum it up in 3 ways. I see everybody as a potential mentor. Yeah. Everybody. Yeah. Of any age. Any age. It could be a child to someone elderly. And there's always some sort of teachings in that if you're open to it. The other mentor would be my wife. She would be my greatest mentor. I call her my greatest teacher, to be honest. And the other mentor would be my great friend in Bali. Amazing leader. And the interesting thing is, when we were training, because we caught up for a training session, weight training, and he laughed at me. He said, "You know what, bro? You seek information from me when your wife is the greatest mentor that you could ever have." And we laughed.
Was she there? Did she hear this?
No, I told her about it. He goes, "Yeah, bro, you seek the answers, you seek strategies, plans from me when your greatest teacher is your wife. She's there telling you that you're this and you're that and you can do that and you can be this and all these great things." But often we're not open to those sources of information from people in our immediate space, and we often seek it from people that are known. Yeah. And this is one of the greatest leaders, in my opinion, telling me that the greatest teacher is your wife.
So just for people listening, we're talking about who we're talking about here? Is this
his name?
Is this Hanari O'Brien? Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So he's I don't know a lot about him. I know of him, but he's a New Zealand. Well, he's from New Zealand. What is his?
He's it's quite hard to explain what he actually is.
Okay.
Because once you label him, you negate him.
Yeah. Okay.
And he goes under the name of the unenlightened spiritual warrior. And
bit of a pun on the old once were warriors. Is it back in the day?
But he's a leader in the true sense. Because if we go back to what I spoke about previously, a leader is someone that looks to create transformations in their lives when they're most confronted by. So some sort of risk and crisis is involved. This man and his wife create more transformations in areas where they're most confronted by than any other human being that I know of. And to see him constantly go into these areas, I'm thinking, oh boy, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do that. One time, him and his wife were having this massive flu. And he came on and did a live stream to explain while they're still in the act of bluing in front of an audience.
Wow.
And I saw that. And his simple explanation was, we can't ask people to be for us what we're unwilling to be for them. So if we're wanting...
a level of authenticity there.
Authenticity. Right? And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, wow, that is leadership of the highest level. I don't think I could get on, do a live stream with my wife arguing. Well, I can't do because my wife never argues with me. Never. So that's an impossibility, right? But I could imagine how hard that would be for most people.
Yeah.
But he creates leadership in as many areas as he can. Wow. So he's a leader in the true sense.
Sort of shows me that, one thing I've noticed with you is that you've been able to find a proximity to who you consider a great leader. So I've known of stories where you've managed to meet the Wayne Dyers. I've seen you in back rooms of events with Eric Thomas, who I think is a mentor of yours and of sorts. And then the big one, or the other one I heard of, is the time you got to spend with Arnie, which you've talked about. Do you want to run us through that story a little bit? I mean, how did you and how you got there and how it eventuated? Yeah.
It was actually just quite by luck, really. I mean,
was it really luck, but?
Yeah, well, I don't know. There might be something else happening in the universe, something known to me.
Yeah.
But I got to know the promoters.
Yeah. I
just met the promoters in Auckland, and we become friends. And I was at the Eric Thomas event, which I saw you. You were there,
I was there, yeah.
And the promoter, Naomi, came out and said, "Oh, can you just hang out with Eric Thomas, and just make sure no one gets close." So, no worries, no worries. Right? This is Eric Thomas. For some of you who don't know, he's like the number one motivational speaker in the world at this point in time. So now I'm just spending a bit of time with him in the green room. And then when we got home that night, I'm lying in bed, and my wife gets a message from the promoter, who's bringing Arnie over in a few months' time. But anyway, she sends a message to my wife, and I say to my wife, "Who was that?" Because it was late at night, and she said, "That was Naomi, and she wants to know if you want to be bodyguard for Arnie next March." And I go, "Just send me the details."
So just to put, you've done a little bit of, not bodyguard work, but you've done some crowd management type work, but like 20 years ago, like it's not something you've done. Like recently, it's not like maybe we'll pick out of these three providers. So you just happen to be around, and obviously, fairly built individual, and you get asked to sort of help, like look after Eric, and then hey, do you want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger's bodyguard for a few days when he comes to Sydney, right? So then, all right, so tell me, how was the experience? I mean, what did you get from him from that sort of close proximity for a couple of days?
Oh, I can tell you many things, but I've read about people, I've seen people, I've spoken to people, very influential people in the world, and some famous people, and they're all sort of driven. But Arnie has a drive unlike any human being I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not talking about lifting weights, because I didn't see him lifting weights when I was with him. But I saw this level of certainty I have not seen in a human being. Like wherever he was going, or whatever he wanted to do in that time that I was with him, that's where we were going, and that's what we were doing. Even as something as simple as going for a bike ride. We went for a bike ride around Darling Harbour. And we were on bikes, and we were flying. And you know how many people were in Darling Harbour at any one time,
so
right?
You're chasing him round, right?
There were literally thousands of people in Darling Harbour walking around, right? So we're like 5 growing kids on bikes flying, and Arnold didn't stop for anyone. People literally had to jump out of the way. He doesn't stop. And then there's a truck backing out of a laneway, which for nearly everybody that I know of, you would stop for a truck. He just flew around this little gap between the truck and the wall and flew down the side. And then these 2 guys come out with these stop signs. And I thought, okay, Arnie has to stop here. He goes straight for them. Straight for them. And then that's when I said to the PA who was on his bike beside me, I said, is he always like this? And he said, Arnie stops for no one. And I thought, wow. And then we went for something to eat, at a restaurant, and we weren't. It was like I don't know. I don't even know if there's 5-star dining, but it was just fine dining, and we weren't dressed appropriately. We were dressed in shorts, and hats, sweaty, and everybody else was dressed in business attire and business suits and stuff. And so I stood back and I go, we're not going in there. We can't. And then someone said to Arnie, we can't eat in there because we haven't got quite right attire. He goes, oh, okay. Then he has a conversation with the manager, and within 5 minutes we're sitting down and we're eating. I was thinking, how did he do that? How did he do? But he has this level of certainty, like I said, I've not seen in any human being. It's like, this is what we're doing, and there's no obstacles. And I remember when we were going in the elevator, and someone said something. I think it might have been the PA, and Arnie said, you human beings, you see obstacles. I see nothing. And I thought,
is that him suggesting he's not a human being, or is he just?
Yeah. So now I'm standing and I'm going, wow. And I'm actually thinking now I'm part of a movie set, and I'm thinking, this is too unreal. You human beings, you see obstacles, I see nothing.
Crazy.
Yeah, so it was amazing.
So just the faith, like a level of faith, and then just to beyond that, I guess, just certainty around what he was doing, what he wanted to achieve. I guess small and big by the sounds of it. He was just, yeah. I mean, what do you take from that? I mean, how do you then how do you apply that to yourself, and what did that experience provide?
Well, we've been conditioned. This is my belief. Whenever we're going for something, we see obstacles. And the biggest obstacle is not what we see, it's what we are being. We are our biggest obstacles. So in order to create something worthwhile, is you need to get out of your own way. And when you get out of your own way, the obstacles just disappear. Because like Arnie said, there are no obstacles other than the ones we imagine there to be. And the switch went on, some time ago. I thought, wow, that's it. There are no obstacles. He comes like Arnie. He goes to America to act. And they say to him, you can't speak English, and you have an accent that's laughable.
Turns out to be his greatest asset, right?
It's his greatest asset. And
you're too big, right?
Yeah, it's too big. Then they said to him, "You're too big," but he didn't see them as physical obstacles that were going to prevent him getting what he actually wanted in life. So it's like, okay, how do I get out of my own way in order to get what I actually want? And that's the big take home for me. There is no real obstacles there. There may be stuff that slows us down, but if we get out of our own way, there's about 50 different options that we can take.
Yeah.
And that's, sorry, yeah.
No. Yeah, so I just thought you wrapped up. So you're right, there's options, right? There's always options, and they flow on to the next thing. So it's yeah, just remarkable. I mean, I have a lot of respect for him. I think people see him differently at times, but I just, witnessing what he's just chosen to go and do, whether it's political, whether it's, in the bodybuilding and that kind of world, whether it's in the acting space, and then and business. I mean, people don't realise he made all his money from property development. Like, you wouldn't think it, but like, he was trying to become an actor. Meanwhile, was building stuff and developing property, and that's how he made his money whilst still sleeping on his friend's couch because he was too cheap to spend the money. But that is come from he obviously had this certainty and this vision from a very early space of what he was out there and he was going to do. All right, I've just got a couple of little rapid fire questions, and we'll sort of wrap up soon. So if we were to open up your phone right now and have a look at the last podcast or YouTube video or something you've listened to watch, what's that? What does that look like?
Well, being in Bali, I was listening to a lot of John Legend.
Okay.
All of Me, songs All of Me. And I listened to that song many, many times. And the other thing that I was listening to is a guy by the name of, his name is Neem Karoli Baba Maharaj.
Okay.
And he was a man that lived in India and he was considered as a saint. So I was listening to that. So that's what you'll find.
Awesome. That's cool. I'll find that.
Yeah.
I know I'll be wanting to listen to it myself, but I'll link that in the notes too.
The name was convincing you.
Even the name has convinced me that he's considered a saint. I'm in. I'm willing. One thing I was chatting with someone about yesterday is ancient texts, and he's reading a lot of ancient texts. And we read a lot of, consume a lot of content at the moment, but there's all these stories come from deeper and older stories, and the further you go back, it's really interesting to sort of consume them because even the language is different and what they mean by the use of certain words, and it's just it's enjoyable actually to dig deeper and then reapply, because they obviously lived in a very different world but very much the same world, in back in the day. So that sounds very interesting. So if the next one is, if you were locked away in solitary confinement for 12 months, if you can get your head around that. I don't really mind what you've done to get there, but what's the one book that you'd want to have with you? And what do you consider would be the book that would get you through?
Probably How to Get Out, How to Escape.
Yeah.
That would be the one book. How to Escape.
It's a book called How to Escape,
is it? How to Escape. Because I can't live on purpose.
You can't live on purpose in there?
With solitary confinement.
All right. So the last one is then for people, and I asked the same question because the podcast is Amplify Your Business. So what's the one thing that you would say to people that they could do to amplify their business or life?
I would say look into what it is that you truly want to do in your lifetime. What is it that gives most meaning to your existence? And what is it that truly means for you to live on purpose? And I would end it by saying, you either go for it or die trying.
I love it. What a perfect way to end it. The last thing I would just say is, where can people find out a bit more about you? Like, what are your social handles, website? Where can they learn, catch up with you, get in touch with you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is Marriner Performance, www.marrinerperformance.com.au. Yep. That's my website. Or you can go to my Facebook page, which is Marriner Performance.
Yep.
Or you can look up my personal Facebook page, which is under Danny Marriner.
Perfect. All right. So if anyone wants to check Danny out, there's been some pretty interesting stuff in this podcast. We'll link up as much of the books and texts and other bits and pieces as we can. But it's been a pleasure, and I think you may have just cracked the longest podcast that we've recorded at this point. So just having a quick look at the timer. So awesome. Well done. But it's been a pleasure. As I said, from conceiving the idea of this podcast, you were a person who came to mind that I'd love to get in and have a chat with, and I'm really excited and glad that we've done this, and I'm looking forward to putting it out to the audience. So thank you very much, and maybe we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it, man.
Awesome.
It's awesome.
Thanks, Danny.
You're welcome, man.
Hey guys, Matt Hanham here, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the Amplify Your Business podcast. I hope you got some awesome value out of the experience, and I'd love to hear your comments below, or if you want to share it with your friends, that'd be great too. Till next time, cheers.